So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for coming back, or welcome if it's your first time attempting this meeting with us. We had some technical difficulties the other day, and I'm not sure if you have noticed over in the participant window, both Nick and myself are logged in as other personalities on different machines, just as backup to make sure that we don't have the same hiccups that we had the other day. So just a few announcements for you this morning, and if you don't know who I am, I'm Julie Yak, and I run the xRMVirtual user group with the help of several other folks. And so we're here today to learn from Nick about portal development. And actually, Nick, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but we are in the middle of redoing our portal for the user group. We've got our sandbox ready to go and in process of testing, and hopefully we'll be promoting it to production here very soon.
Awesome.
So with that, you did hear that I was recording. So if you are not interested in having your questions or whatnot as part of the recording, you'll just need to exit the meeting and then watch the recording. We've not had issues with that in the past, and I do encourage you with this new platform that we're using to go ahead and ask your questions. You can tap them in the chat window. Nick can see them. You have the ability to take yourself off mute and ask the questions as well. So by all means do that. You can pull me into a private chat and ask questions, just whatever way makes you comfortable. And we'd love to get those questions addressed for you in real time. So here is your logistics, and actually I just realized that this is the logistics slide that we used in live meetings, so these things don't apply. So I'll have to be making a new one. So my apologies. I assume that you all have used Skype for Business before and know how to use the chat on the left-hand side, and if not, unmute yourself and start asking some questions. We are always looking for new speakers. This is Nick's first time presenting to our group. We found him with the developers SIG group that we have with CRMUG. So he's here to share with us his information about the portals. So if there's something that you'd like to present and start presenting, by all means let me know. But also if you have a topic that you're interested in learning more about and you want me to find a speaker, that's great too. Drop me an email, let me know, and I will do my best to find a speaker and get that covered for you. We've got a next meeting coming up in just a couple of weeks here. We've got 2 meetings in the same day. It's the same meeting twice, essentially, just to make sure that we've got the time zones covered. And we've got the ISV showcase, and we've got Kingswaysoft, Aventa CRM, Maplytics, and the Dynamics 365 WordPress plugin. And they'll all be presenting for about 10 or 15 minutes and open to questions throughout that time. And then obviously communication with the folks afterwards. And we've been probably a year or more since we've done an ISV showcase, so I'm looking forward to this so we can learn more about some of the tools that many of us use every day or should be using every day. We've got a couple of conferences coming up. CRMUG Focus is the beginning of May, and I will be presenting at that along with several of the other MVPs and friends of our user group. And currently the call for speakers is open for CRMUG Summit that is happening later this year, and the location is no longer Tampa. It is actually going to be in Nashville. So hopefully if you have sessions that you'd like to listen to, you can make those suggestions as a call for speakers, whether or not you're going to present it. If it's something that you're just interested in hearing, just like we do here for the user group, submit the request, and if the topic is selected, then they go out and shop for a speaker on your behalf. Speaking of CRMUG, here's just a sampling of some of the meetings that they have available. We work in tandem with them all the time. I work on their developer user group that they have there. It's a special interest group. So that group meets once a quarter. We talk about different ideas and what we'd like to perhaps learn over here in this group. And then this group over here is the heavy lifting group. It's the let's get down and dirty and talk about code. So that's what we do over here. But we're every day with this folks over at CRMUG. And with that, I'm going to pass off to Nick. And this is our slide from 2 days ago, because 2 days ago when we were supposed to be having this meeting was Nick's birthday. So happy birthday, Nick, a belated birthday.
Thank you.
And I'm ready to pass off to you whenever you're ready to start sharing.
Okay, perfect.
You're sharing, I'll go on mute and just be sitting here listening.
Let's hope I don't lose. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. This worked earlier, so
Yes, we have practiced today.
yes, definitely. Okie doke. So I'm
I'm not
hoping
seeing yet. I officially stopped sharing mine.
um,
It's loading.
it's loading. I see on
Portal
my backup
Developer
machine it's
Primer.
loading.
Yes, we've
Awesome.
got it.
Okay, we're live,
Yes,
folks.
so I'll be on mute, and Faradin has confirmed that he sees your slides as well.
Excellent.
Thank you, Faradin.
Okay, cool. All right, welcome everybody. And again, my apologies for Tuesday, but as Julie had mentioned to me after when we tried to sort it, no developers were harmed in the process, so as far as we're aware anyway. So we're going to move on. So I'm just going to talk today about the Portal Developer Primer. Probably a lot of you guys know a lot of this information already. A little bit about the history about ADX Studio portals. That was an ISV. They were bought by Microsoft and kind of brought a lot of the team over, and working with Microsoft, they kind of revamped the portals and made the CRM Online Portals add-on. And that's really, it's a tool where, power users are able to deploy, the powerful portals. So my session is, now there's been probably, you've heard a few things saying, well, with the portals, developers can't develop any code to it. It's really static and, things like that. And a lot of that's partially true, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm kind of gearing this to somebody who is basically in the same position I was a couple years ago, where I've been doing CRM for many years, and it's like, okay, we got a portal project, let's go. It's like, oh shoot, okay, I got to ramp myself up. So this way, I'm hoping to get, at least get people started, get them thinking about their solutions and how they can deploy some of their business requirements with portals. Just a little bit about myself. I am the manager of CRM solution development at BDO IT Solutions. I'm in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. The sun is shining today, but I heard this morning we're getting some more snow again. So it is what it is. It's Canada. You can follow me at Twitter at ReadyXRM. I do have a blog. I've been keeping fairly regular posts on that. BDO also has a blog, really focused a lot, not only on Dynamics 365, or actually all the family of 365 with Great Plains and Nav and all that as well. My email is there, so I don't, as long as you don't inundate me with tons of spam, I don't mind taking questions over email as well. This community is great to connect with. I learned so much from all you guys, and from the blogs and everything else, that, it's a really great collaboration. So today I'm going to talk about all the development options you have. I'm going to focus really on the CRM Online portal, not so much on ADX, just because the availability of that is kind of being, I don't want to say phased out. There's sort of, Microsoft's very careful with their wording on that, but it's not really the focus. I'm going to give a few demos, some examples. And then for sure, open to questions. I want to make sure I save some time at the end for questions, but if something pops up along the way, there's the chat window, I see it. We can try to address that. If it's something that's going to be a big, huge topic, then definitely we can, either save it to the end, or we can have a private conversation later and kind of go through that. And if it's relevant to everybody, then maybe it's something I'll blog about or we'll share. So, I'm guessing a lot of you probably have been a little bit familiar already with portals, but for those of you who are not, I'm going to assume everybody at least knows what Dynamics 365, what formerly known as CRM is. When I talk about CRM 365, I mean customer engagement. Microsoft is really the namings. I'm not even going to get into that argument debate right now. But when I'm talking about Dynamics 365, I'm really talking about CRM. So I'm going to give a 30-second portal basics here of what the portal is. And what it is, it's a portal that's tied into Dynamics 365. You can't deploy a Microsoft Dynamics 365 online portal without CRM, essentially. And really, it's a CMS, and a CMS like a content management system of sorts. And where Dynamics 365 is where all the data is stored, all your configuration, your web pages, your content. What's cool about it, it's got built-in authentication, so you don't have to worry about figuring all that out. You can use like regular login and passwords, or you can tie it into Facebook, Google, or some other authentication providers. And not only that, provides forms. So if you create some CRM forms and some views in your again, Dynamics 365 system, I'm just going to be right up front. I'm going to call it CRM probably for the next 10 years at least. It's just a way that you can build some of those forms and those views that you've already built probably for some of your projects or own entities. The portal allows you to surface those to web pages, so that's really powerful. And again, it's only available for Dynamics 365 online in this version. So yes, ADX does still exist. However, in order to, as probably most of you know, in order to acquire that, you need to actually present a bit of a business case to Microsoft in order for them to sell you a license. So if you're doing on-prem installations, that's kind of your only recourse if you want to use the ADX, what we call the ADX legacy. But that's not to say that's your only option. There are definitely other portal options. My team, they did a project recently using the portal connector by Pavlix, and it's actually a really great option for doing on-prem portals. So definitely lots of tools to work with. So that's my 30-second, probably went 45 to a minute. So when I talk about portals, what are our options? So you probably have understood that with the new online portals, we don't have access to that back-end code, but what's available to us? Well, if you are a developer and you've already been developing plugins and workflows or custom actions and all of that stuff, we can access that through the portal. So as we update information or we go through steps, we can actually still use Microsoft Dynamics 365. All that traditional stuff is still relevant. And I do have an example that I will want to show you guys today of using that. And then we have some of the traditional stuff, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, JQuery. Those are, very traditional web development tools, and we can still utilize those same technologies in the portal. They haven't gone away. We can do a lot of neat stuff with that. And again, I have a few examples of that today. And then I have that on my screen. You'll notice Shopify, and you probably are wondering, well, isn't that like an e-commerce platform? Well, it is, but Shopify developed a few years ago an open source language called Liquid. And maybe some of you, if you have read my blog, I've made a few posts on Liquid. I'm going to be covering some of that material today. Liquid is a markup language, and it's, the more I get into it, the more I'm kind of like, wow, I can actually do a lot through some configuration where, even a year ago or a couple years ago, I would have been building custom ASPX page templates. So I definitely, want to cover a little bit about that. And at the end of the day, if you are developing a CRM Online portal and you still need some heavy lifting, you need to actually crack out Visual Studio, you can still do that. Or not even Visual Studio, but some of your other favorite tools. If you're a PHP developer, if you want to develop on Ruby on Rails, you can build, I would call them sort of side-along applications, and you could actually call them from the portal. So your portal users or your portal audience, they don't really know the difference. They don't know that they're leaving the portal. It's all, kind of transparent to them. I'll just kind of give you an example of that sort of near the end. But again, it's just sort of like, let's not get the word that you can't do any development in portals. You definitely can. So of course and I will kind of touch on that. You kind of heard me mention a few times about, what about building custom page templates in Visual Studio? And I know that if you're beginning to get new or being into portals and you're beginning to look into it, you'll probably come across the ADX Studio website that's still up. There's still a lot of documentation there. And you'll kind of dig into it and you'll see that, hey, a lot of the examples they give, they're actually developing page templates using Visual Studio. So those page templates, the ability to do that is one of the features that is not currently in the CRM Online portals. I know that if you go to the CRM Idea site, there's actually, and I kind of like to point people there, there's kind of a vote that up, so we have that ability. And we kind of hear different things. I know there's a few things in the work coming from the Microsoft Portal side, but at this point, we can't create those custom ASPX page templates. However, you still can create web apps and things like that, as I mentioned before, and tie it into portals. So if you are a long-time dynamic CRM developer, you've probably learned over the years that, you know what, you can, before you actually start creating a plugin, before you start making custom web controls to build into iframes and things like that, you should always ask the question, well, can you configure it? Like, as opposed to creating a plugin, could we do this in a workflow? Could we do this in a business rule? Not always the case. Sometimes plugins, and believe me, I'm a big proponent of development. Plugins make the most sense, but then sometimes you realize, you know what, yeah, we could write a plugin to this, but you know what, for this particular business case, a workflow will work just as well. And of course, with those configuration options, you can still, you can achieve a lot of your business requirements. It's easier to maintain, easier to upgrade. Your power users can manage it. Your power users can actually build some of that business logic. The same thing for the portal as well. So I have a screenshot there. I'm showing, an entity list. So again, we're surfacing data, on a portal screen. I've got some filters set up. There's some searching abilities. There's sorting. There's drill downs. All of that is configurable within the portal itself. So I didn't have to do any kind of coding or anything like that. So I really just wanted to highlight that, because before you kind of crack open your coding tools, hey, just take a look around, get yourself familiar with the portal, see what you can do. And then sometimes you could configure something in 10 minutes, where if you actually had to develop a custom page or something like that, it could take you a few days. So really kind of keep your eye, helps keep these portal projects under budget and also very maintainable. That always being said too, is even with the portal out of the box, there are some special controls as well. So for instance, there's a built-in map control that utilizes either Bing Maps, Google, or I think there's another third app or third provider that does mapping as well. So, these are kind of the things, where you maybe would consider building something from scratch before. This is actually out of the box functionality. I also want to point out not only maps, but calendars. A lot of times if we're doing any kind of event management or need to show things with dates, there is a calendar control and again, this is all done through configuration. And when we'll take a look at an entity list in my CRM system, I can point out where those things are configured. I just do want one little asterisk on this one. The calendar control, I've been seeing on the forums that there seems to be on the latest version of the portals, 8.2, that there's been a lot of people are having trouble getting this configured. I'm in the same boat. This screenshot is actually from the old ADX legacy app, but it basically, I know it is a feature that should be available on the CRM Online portals, but there seems to be some issues with the page template. So I actually have a ticket open with Microsoft on this one. So hopefully I have some more information there to kind of sort that out and how we can get the workarounds. So just to dive into a little bit of our options. So once you've kind of looked at your portal, you've exhausted, okay, we can't all do this through configuration. We actually need to start creating some code. What can we do? So here's an example that we had to do where we had to create an invitation code request page. And this is where we actually created a plugin on the CRM side. So this is an example of creating traditional plugins. So if you're a CRM developer that's been developing plugins for years, this is kind of right in your wheelhouse kind of thing. So what we did was we created an entity form, and basically by doing this entity form, someone were able to, people that are publicly visiting the portal, they can key in their email address, they could submit that. So what that happens is we created a custom entity called invitation code request. As soon as that record was created, it fired a plugin on the CRM side. It searched the entire contact database to see if there was a match on the email address. If there was, so therefore we knew there was already an existing contact in our CRM system, then we were able to send them an email and generate an invitation code. And that invitation code, that's part of out of the box portal capabilities. They're able to take this invitation code and then log into the portal, set up their authentication, their login, their password, preferences, and things like that. This was important because we wanted to make sure for this particular client that duplicates didn't get created, because as you know, you can go in and register for the portal. And we also had a lot of existing contacts when we went live. So there's a case of, again, some simple portal configuration, some plugins, and that was able to kind of get around a problem. Now, the portal does have the ability to email out invitation codes, even en masse. But for this particular client, they had 6 million contacts. And so we weren't prepared to send out 6 million emails and getting ourselves all sorts of trouble with spam lists. And then even that would burn through a Click Dimensions subscription pretty fast. So we kind of opened it up, made some public announcements that the website was ready. And then people sort of could opt in as opposed to trying to set it up the other way around. So again, just an example of using traditional CRM development and tying it into the portal. So what I do want to talk about, and this is where I'll probably spend a little bit more time because I think this is a pretty powerful, and I believe that in a lot of your portal projects, this could be where you spend a lot of your time, is the Liquid markup language. So here, as I mentioned, this is kind of a link. Liquid, or screenshot sort of to the Shopify site with some basics around Liquid. Liquid is a markup language. It was developed by Shopify, and the folks at ADX incorporated it around, I think, 7.007 version, and because they were looking for, an ability to be able to control content dynamically on web pages, but realized that people didn't always have the Visual Studio skill set, or were creating a lot of custom page templates that were very difficult to upgrade and to push updates to the portal. So they wanted to find a way that they could go beyond regular HTML. So they use this liquid language. So probably a lot of you are going, great, I know C#, JavaScript, like this is yet another language that I need to learn. It's actually not too bad. Here really the basics are down to three concepts. There's objects, and those objects are items within the web page itself. So here I'm showing like the user.fullname. This will actually, and I'll show you an example of, it can actually pull CRM data as well and entities. Then there's also tags. So here I have an if user. So really that means if any user exists. So this is where we can kind of control what we're displaying on the portal. And then other filters. So I can see here's user first name, and I'm going to move that to an uppercase, things like that. So I'm actually going to show you some examples now before we move on. So let's pop open a portal. So for those of you who may know me or seen some of my other presentations before, I've done a few at different conferences. I'm actually a competitive powerlifter, so for fun, I go to the gym and I pick up heavy things, something that keeps me fit. So I'm kind of developing this portal specifically for the powerlifting club. So anyways, let's kind of focus back on our Liquid. So if I go to the website here, I click on Hello World, and I get this thing coming up, well, hello friend. Very basic, but here I've kind of used Liquid to kind of change things around. Now, if I actually sign in to the portal, and I'm going to do that. And so now I say, hello, Nick Doelman, how about I just call you Nick? So just by virtue of signing in, Liquid has now actually dynamically has changed the content. So let's take a quick look at that. So for those of you who know how portals work, you know that the content we could do through front-side editing, or I could do through Dynamics 365. So I'm actually going to go to my recent records, and I love this little shortcut thing. I mean, this is such a cool thing. So I've created a web template, and I've created a Hello World web template. And web templates are really scaffolding for kind of your pages and things like that. So in my web template, I've given it a name. Here's the website custom portal. And I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit on that, just so it makes it a little bit easier for you guys to see. So we can see here, if you've already been used to doing things like in HTML or CSS, you're going to actually find Liquid's really not too bad at all. So I've just created a container just to make it a little bit, kind of make it a little bit more visually more appealing. Oh, this never happens to everybody else. Let's go back to Hello World here. So here I have if user. So really I'm just seeing, hey, is there a user logged in or not? And then if not, hello user full name. And how about I just call you and this and that. And then else I'm just going to do hello friend. Very basic construct, but that really shows the power of Liquid and how you can use it to manipulate your web pages and your web templates on a portal. Now, what I like about this as well, if I had to do this in the old ADX, either in ADX version 5 or version 6, or even some of the earlier versions of 7, maybe if this was a requirement, there would have been a couple ways. I could have done some HTML and JavaScript to do that, which probably would have got a little onerous. Or I would have had to go into Visual Studio. I would have had to create a custom page template. I would have had to create that ASPX page. I would have, tested it. Then I would have compiled the code, and then I would have had to push that portal to either my IIS server or push it up to Azure. So we're talking, even for something simple like this, we're talking quite a bit of time, quite a bit of effort just to, get something dynamic to show up on a portal. But here, I'm in CRM, so I'm just going to change one of my things here. I'm going to go from user first name. I'm just going to go user last name. I said, how about I just call you Mr. And notice here I have the filter for uppercase. So I'm going to actually just do that. I've saved my template. I'm going to pop back up to my portal. And I'm just going to do a refresh here because the data is updated. We don't have to do the clear cache. And give it another second here. So maybe I will do a clear cache. Oh, interesting. That is supposed to change, but of course this is a demonstration, a webinar, so everything can't be perfect. But I hope you do get the idea that in here with these this information and updating the Liquid, this is again how we can update and move through using Liquid to kind of create those dynamic web pages. So this was, again, meant to say this was supposed to be instantaneous. It wasn't, but you get the idea. Moving along. So again, I have sort of the screenshots of my presentation. We'll make that available after. The other thing that we can do is pulling dynamic CRM information. So I'm actually going to pop back to my portal again. Now that I'm logged in, I've created a thing here for my invoices. I'm going to take a look at that. This out of the box is really just a straight up entity list. This doesn't take you long to configure. You go and you create the entity list in CRM. Then you create the view in CRM, you create an entity list, you create a web page, and then it's all surfaced. Very quick, very easy. And if I actually were to drill down, I created an entity form down here, even showing, so I actually see all the details of my invoice. But really, I just want to highlight this up here. So I actually am displaying the GUID of the invoice. And again, we wouldn't necessarily create on a production portal, we wouldn't be showing GUIDs, but I really wanted to show that using Liquid, I'm actually displaying the GUID because I passed it in the entity list. And now I've also showing the invoice name and actually the invoice amount. We'll talk about that Pay Now button in a minute. But basically, this again is Liquid, but I'm using Liquid to pull CRM data directly from the database. And so again, you can understand the power of that. You can begin to create your own layouts and things, but you're actually showing CRM data. So if I'm going to pop over to my back to my CRM again. And the nice thing about Liquid, you don't always just have to use Liquid within templates. You could actually use it within web page records as well. So I'm going to go into my invoice detail web page. And again, as you get familiar with Portal, you understand that web pages and web templates and things all relate back to records within CRM. So here I'm on the web page, the content page, and that structure has changed recently in 8.2. So you have your your container page, and then you have a content page for the different languages. But that's a whole other conversation. And we are getting a question. Are you able to retrieve data from a related entity with Liquid? That's a great question. I believe so. You can, and I don't have an example, but you can use Fetch XML I believe, to pull that related information. So it is something, yeah, you should be able to do that. I have done it. I don't have an example here, but I have done that in the past where I'm able to kind of pull some related stuff.
So I see at least one Addaxio person on the attendee list, and I assume that if that's an incorrect answer, we'll hear from him to let us know if that's something else that we have to do to make that happen.
Oh, okay. I see that. It's Colin.
Yep. I wasn't going to call him out by name. I was going to let him be anonymous if he wanted to. That's all right.
Perfect.
So,
To be quite honest, I actually learned a lot of the stuff I learned about portals from Colin there about a year or two ago. So that's awesome that he's here. So basically what I've done here in the Liquid, just to get back to pulling out that CRM information. Again, I just really wanted to show that the GUID was being passed, and that was just being passed using regular portal methods by just showing the ID there. And here under the %, the assign invoice, I'm actually assigning that object. I've created an object invoice. I've used those objects entities.invoice and then passing the request parameter. So really if you guys, knowing CRM, you know the retrieve statement. Effectively, I'm retrieving the record from the database. And once I've retrieved that record, then I can begin to display it in Liquid. I got the invoice.name, the invoice.total amount, and then here I actually have some Liquid codes, some tags here. So if the status is this, meaning it's not paid, show my pay now button, else just kind of show the status code label. So again, we are able to pull that data directly from Dynamic CRM or 365. Now, one thing I do want to point out, though, is using Liquid, we can't write data back. So if I think that I can actually do something like create a tax calculation here or something like that using Liquid and then write it back to the database, that's actually not possible. That's actually where we actually need to go look at some other methods. Typically you would probably want to do that kind of stuff on the CRM side or call out to another web application. So I just wanted to point out Liquid is really just meant to help display that content dynamically and pull some of the information from CRM and display that. So that's that's sort of the example that I've given of pulling that information. So that's great. That's, one record. But what if I wanted to pull multiple records? So the other example I've got here is, and I'll kind of go from this point, kind of change gears a little bit. I am going to come back to the invoice. Is I've created a web template to show a list of data. So here is where, again, I've not used Fetch XML for this. I don't want to say I've cheated, but I'm actually still using an entity list. So I've created a web template here. We have the tags, things like that. I am showing the breadcrumbs like I normally would on a web page, including stuff like the page header, including the page copy, so a lot of those details. And I've identified my entity list. Now, because on my web page I've identified an entity list, then I could also just put in the tag to display the entity list, and then it's the same as what portal configurators are used to of displaying an entity list. And on the portal, I'm all about pictures, so let's just pop over to the portal. If I go to my powerlifting meets, I see a list of upcoming meets here. This really, that's just a straight up entity list. And that's effectively what we can still do this in Liquid just by identifying to show the entity list, or we could just use it the regular template, web templates. But this could be a little bit boring for somebody. They're like, you know what? The grid is fine, but the grid seems very, I don't know, accountants like grids. Designers are more, let's kind of put this in kind of a nicer format, that kind of thing. So instead of just using an entity list, maybe this is where Liquid really is powerful. We can begin to format it and lay it out. So I'm going to pop back again to my web template where I got the list of data. So here I'm still using the entity list to get my data per se, and I'm actually picking out the view, and I created that view. Here's the logical name for the entity. It's BDOIT meet. Here's the name, active meets. And then for each item in that entity view, I'm going to show the name, the description, and the start date and time within the concept of those that entity list. So I've created that template. I've created an associated page template. I've created a web page. And so now when I actually look on that web page, I've created that here, and I call it my powerlifting meet list. I got a much nicer, cleaner layout. And again, just using Liquid formatting. So again, to give it some context, this really didn't take me too long at all to build that that list. It was probably, I don't know, probably a few minutes to build it out. Of course, you know, it's not super heavily designed, but I can begin to go in and manipulate it, make things bold, move things around. If I wanted to do this, and believe me, I did, I think my first project was using ADX version 5. We actually, the client wanted a lot of these directory type views in their portal. What we ended up having to do is we went into Visual Studio, we created a specific page template, and then had to use that page template. And again, and every time we made a change, we had to push it out. They didn't like the spacing. We had to kind of work with that a little bit, change some of that. And again, we could do some of that with CSS, but then even then there's some other things. Oh, okay, we didn't want this piece of data. We wanted another one. So again, it was very tedious. It took a long time. And then again, we had to figure out, okay, we're going to push the portal at this time. You know, how do we synchronize that? Just a lot of issues where here, if we want to make a change, we just go in and we modify that template, and then boom, the results should be pretty instantaneous. So again, that's really the power of Liquid. And I've been working with this every day on some other projects, and the more I get into it, the more excited I get. And just doing some stuff now with dashboards. So to me, this is where, as a developer, you know, yeah, as much as we want to start developing other stuff using Visual Studio, you know what? There's a lot that we can do here, and it makes developing and deploying portals really a lot easier. And again, this is not a hard language. I think I've heard people say, oh, they're kind of scared of Liquid once you first look at it, but once you actually get into it, I mean, for me, it's a lot of fun. It's pretty cool to get, and I'm very much a results-oriented guy. All right, so that's just sort of my little blurb on Liquid. And yeah, thanks. Collins posted on the chat window some details about pulling relationships. So thanks, Colin. Really appreciate that. So hopefully, Rod, that answers or points you in the right direction. So the other thing I want to talk about, let's get my PowerPoint going here. Just a little bit about Liquid. Again, I'm going to make these decks available, but great examples already. If you spin up a portal and you look at the web templates, a lot of great examples there. The administrator's guide, you can get that from this link here. That to me is sort of, it's a PDF that sits on my computer. I refer to it a lot. Again, you can extend. So I wanted to highlight that because you could create, as opposed to recreating a lot of templates, you can chain them together. So you can kind of build on functionality. Again, dynamic templates, you can display data, you can't write back to data, and I can only imagine that Microsoft, the portals team, is just going to keep putting out new stuff all the time. I want to talk a little bit about, we still have lots of time here, a little bit about JavaScript. JavaScript has been around in portals for a while. That really should be, it's a great way to manipulate that front side information as well. I like to use JavaScript a lot when I'm using like entity lists and entity forms, some of those out of the box controls that the portal provides. So again, it's a case of we go into the JavaScript could be put different places. So if you guys remember my example that I alluded to earlier in my invoices. So I'm looking at this one. We see now that there's a Pay Now button. Here I actually have some JavaScript tied behind that. So as opposed to doing the front side, I'm just going to go to my web page, or my entity form rather, or actually no, I'm going to go to my web page. In my web page, now that was the other thing about JavaScript, you can inject that stuff like almost everywhere. So if I were to go within my web page here, look under Advanced, we see that here we do have a custom JavaScript area. I do have that function that I'm calling for my button. It actually calls the onPay function. And then here I'm passing a bunch of parameters from the invoice. But again, this is all using JavaScript. So you can begin to, and this is where we're kind of, as I kind of tie it off at the end, is kind of talk a little bit about tying it into other portal applications or kind of those web resources. So just to get that communication working between the different sort of portal technologies. So there's that. It's on a web page. Now I also got some, like I said, you can use JavaScript for what you typically use when you are manipulating forms in CRM. Now I do want to point out though, I'm going to go to my entity form here, that the JavaScript that you would write, your business rules and JavaScript that you would put on your Dynamics 365 form. So let's say that you created some JavaScript to hide or show or set, a field mandatory or things like that. That JavaScript currently will not run on your portal forms or your portal entity lists. I'm not sure if that will ever be a feature or not, but I just wanted to make you aware of it, that you think, okay, I spent all this time creating JavaScript on the CRM side. Why isn't it working on the portal? The portal won't run that JavaScript. I just see there is a quick question. I'm just going to quickly answer that. Do form web resources work on the web portal? That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. So I don't know, maybe if someone wants to answer that in the chat window. I don't want to call Colin out, but that'd be great. If I'm just looking at this entity form here, because I've added JavaScript on the CRM side, I wanted to make the billing account visible if it existed or it didn't. So if I had that JavaScript to the CRM side, it's not going to transfer over. However, within my entity form, or I could have done that on the page as well, I'm actually going to use JavaScript here. You see the formats a little bit differently. I'm using the kind of that hashtag and the entity name. Basically, again, very simple JavaScript type thing. Not only am I hiding the field, I need to hide the label as well. So just to show that in action, if I pop back over to my invoice detail here, notice that I don't see there's no billing account. Going to pop back over to to a different invoice, go back to my invoice, my entity list here. I think it's this one. And see here, I do have a billing account. So again, it's a case of the JavaScript being able to manipulate a lot of your entity forms and things like that. So again, JavaScript is a pretty powerful tool at your disposal to manipulate the forms and give you some functionality, really to format data. So things like phone call formatting. You can actually manipulate and pre-fill some of the fields. A lot of stuff you can do there. Now you can stick JavaScript on web pages, entity forms, entity lists, web form steps, a bunch of different places as well. So again, JavaScript is really very powerful. it's a very powerful tool at your disposal. But again, I also want to highlight that using JavaScript, very much like Liquid, you can't use it to write data back to your CRM system. If you know, I'm not to say that you couldn't with JavaScript, but really you wouldn't want to. It would be very tedious. You'd open up all sorts of security issues and things like that. So I'm not even sure how well you would get it to work. So it's really not designed for that. There are much better ways to get data back in to CRM using like things like entity forms, web form steps, things of that sort, and using other methods that we talked about today. Just to make sure I, have some time here. Talked about the entity forms, the web form steps. Again, things won't run on anything that you create in CRM won't run on your portal, and don't use JavaScript to write back. So the last thing I'm going to talk about today is really just another. Oh, there I do have a question. I believe you just have access to. Well, no, you do. Sorry, you have access to the DOM items, but in terms of the XRM page, you do have access. Like if you actually surface an entity form or an entity list, you do have access to that, to those fields in that data, and you can use JavaScript to manipulate it. So, for instance, let's just say you want to like the question from Rod. I have a question for Rod. His question is, with the portal custom JavaScript, do you have access to the XRM page object model or just to the DOM items? So I guess my answer is you don't necessarily have access to the XRM page object model, but you are, if you create a, like for instance, an entity form where you're displaying information from Dynamics CRM. And let's just take, for example, a phone number. If we wanted to format that phone number in JavaScript on CRM, well, then we use the XRM page, refer to the field name, and then kind of run some JavaScript to manipulate that. In the portal, we're kind of accessing the DOM item for that phone number, and yeah, we could manipulate it, but then we still expect the user to submit that form, which would actually write that data back into CRM. So I hope that answers the question. And if not, we can discuss that near the end. What I want to talk about here is, I mentioned earlier, is about to redirect to custom web apps. So here is where you would, you could have your portals within Dynamics CRM, and you can display all that information. But if you need something, question is e-commerce supported in portal? Let me re-answer that, Vinay, in just a second. So here's where we could build something and custom web app. The example I'm giving is something that we wrote in Azure, although you could write that in other applications, especially with the Dynamics CRM, the web API, and write that data back to CRM. So the idea here is, I'm going to show, if I have this Pay Now button, and the question that we just saw in the chat window is e-commerce supported in the portal. So if you were to ask a Microsoft marketing person, they'd say, no, we don't have an e-commerce option in the CRM Online portal, very much like we did in ADX, where we could tie into Authorize.net or PayPal. The portals don't have let's say, a quote-unquote out-of-the-box mechanism to tie into a payment gateway. Is it possible? Absolutely. So what I've done here is I've got this Pay Now button. We've created that using simple HTML. We have some JavaScript behind that. And what that JavaScript will do, if I were to click here, is we've created a separate web app. We've created that in Azure, and I just need to find it. Give me a second here. I got about 1 million pages open. Sorry, folks. there, not there. Here it is. By paying that, I'll get redirected to this. Now this is sitting on an Azure website, and what that did was it passed over this information, really just the invoice ID. And then once I got here, it was able to call back to CRM to pull up my first name, the invoice total, and all that stuff. Now when I hit confirm, it actually, through our web app, because we couldn't actually directly call our payment gateway API directly from within the portal within Liquid or JavaScript, we actually created through our web app using C#. It actually calls the payment gateway, sends over the information. We get that feedback, and then once we get that feedback, we'll write back to CRM using the web API, update that invoice has been paid. We'll create a payment record. We can do partial payments, full payments, and things like that. So this is an example of where, yes, we can do some definitely e-commerce. Now, how we did this, and we actually, I would say we kind of did it the old way. We actually have this authenticated on the back end to our CRM Online instance. But there is a blog posting, and I'm not going to mention any names, Colin, that posted their toolkit on being able to actually make it a lot easier to make web applications talk to CRM and the portal and stuff like that. So highly recommend you guys check that out. I'm actually started to look at it last night, and it was kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. So definitely check that out, because that's a way, and it's actually a framework released by Adioxo, the last couple of weeks. So the community, there actually are tools in the community to achieve some of this stuff. So anyways, that I have about 10 minutes left for questions or complaints, criticisms, or whatnot. I really just wanted to kind of give you guys, basically let you guys know, as developers, it's like, no, like there is hope. You can actually do definitely a lot with the portal, and there's things like that. So I'm just looking at the questions that are coming in. Is there a way for current contacts in our CRM to log in, or do they have to go through the sign-in process through portals? So that was a question from Jeremy. So
Nick, before you jump into that, unless you're going to show something at the same time, might I suggest you put your contact information back up while you're fielding questions?
Oh, sure. No problem at
all. Okay, back to the question. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll do that. Get rid of all this other stuff. Yeah, so there's my contact info. Definitely. So the question is there a way for current contacts in our CRM to log in, or do they have to go through the sign-in process through the portals? So what has to happen is there's some extra information that needs to be added to the contact records within the portal in order for them to authenticate. So it depends. So a couple things. It depends on your authentication method. So let's just say you're using a regular login name and password. And you can, through configuration, you can say, well, make sure they use their email or things like that. Or you could tie it into Facebook and all this other stuff. So, so they don't necessarily have to sign up. The out-of-the-box way is you find your existing contact, and there actually is, and you know what, I'm actually going to pull up. As much as I said we weren't showing stuff anymore, pull up CRM. If I were to look at a contact record, hey, who here likes this new thing? They kind of changed my formatting around. Anyways, if I were to pull up a contact here, here's Jim Glenn, and
it would appear that we may have lost Nick and his presenting. So I guess the time is not bad for that. He was about finished anyway. if he comes back and has a chance to wrap up and finish that question, wonderful. Jeremy and Morrow, did you get his contact information so you can follow up to make sure he answers your question? Okay, let me put mine in here and then I can connect you up with Nick. Okay, so Nick, you're on backup. Let me promote you then and see if we can get this to work. So I've promoted you to presenter, but I don't see you as available with a microphone or available to present. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it a day. I expect to be able to process and post the recording hopefully later today. If not today, then tomorrow. Nick, no apologies. We made it through almost the entire meeting, so I think we're in good shape. I will make sure to connect folks if they have any questions. Nick, would you go ahead and put your email address in the conversation window? So if anybody who wants to connect with you later can ask you those questions. And I will thank you all very much for joining us today. And I look forward to our next meeting in a couple of weeks where we have our ISV showcase. So thank you so much. And thank you, Colin, for jumping in and helping out as well.